Welcome to the 4th Annual Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm Jennifer Daly, President and CEO of ICR Iowa, our region's economic development organization and the proud host of Inclusive ICR. Inclusive ICR is a coalition of over 114 members representing 57 employers from throughout the Iowa City-Cedar Rapids region. Our goal is to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in our regional workforce. We are so excited to be hosting and sponsoring 11 sessions during this year's Iowa Ideas Conference. We hope you enjoy the conversations, make new connections, and walk away with some really big ideas.
And our moderator for this session is Alison Gowans, and she will take it from here. Alison, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Todd. First of all, I want to thank everyone for tuning into this session, and I want to thank our panelists for joining us. This session was originally supposed to be a panel as part of Welcoming Week here in Cedar Rapids, but those events were canceled because of the pandemic, so we're glad we could keep it going here for Iowa Ideas. In the spirit of Welcoming Week, we're going to be talking about what it's like for new immigrants arriving in Iowa and how the community can welcome them, and also what challenges new arrivals face and what solutions we can think about and talk about to bring to those challenges. That's a pretty broad set of topics, so I just want to start off by giving our panelists a chance to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their connection to this topic.
I can start, Alison, if that's okay. My name is Alejandro Pino, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving at YPN, which is Young Parents Network. We had originally, we were a Young Parents Network, now we were just YPN because of that young name in the title can, have different meanings to different people. So while I might consider myself young, Leya may consider me an old man. So, so that's one thing. That's why we just kept it at YPN. But essentially, I immigrated. I'm originally from Lima, Peru, down in South America. I immigrated here when I was 10 years old. I was one of the fortunate people that whose mom is an American citizen. So I really was able to come in fairly easily. But during the time I was growing up in Peru, there was a terrorist group by the name of the Shining Path that was really essentially destroying the country at that point. So my family made a difficult decision to move to the United States. And essentially we came to Cedar Rapids, where my mom's originally from. So in a nutshell, YPN works with also the immigrant and refugee communities as well, our African community as well as a Latinx community as well. And we serve everybody too, but essentially we believe that a healthy family is at the core of a healthy society. So everything that we do really kind of is at that core. However that family unit is made up, we try to really strengthen it by the programming that we offer and the services that we offer as well too. So I'm honored to be here and look forward to a great discussion.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
My name is Leya Neema with the Catherine McAuley Center, Refugee and Immigrant Services. We do resettlement, so welcoming new refugees into Iowa, into the United States, the first 90 days, just assisting with getting them acclimated to this new world that they're in. We also have an employment services program that assists refugees and immigrants with the job search, resume building, interview skills. And we have an adult basic education program that helps teach people how to speak English, and also citizenship classes. Originally, I am from Burundi, Africa. I came to the United States as a refugee as a child. I was 7 years old, almost 8, and I've grown up. Most of my life has been in Iowa, so, but we fled our home country due to the Hutu Tutsi genocide. Went to Tanzania and then came here as refugees. So.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tara Brockovich. I am also not from Iowa. I came here from Illinois. So I didn't have that big of a journey. I taught K-12 education, mostly special education and ESL for about 11 years. And then I moved on to higher education. So at Kirkwood, we offer free ESL classes for students anywhere from 16 on up for adults. And then we assist them in their goals in life, whether that's to move on to get a high school diploma or to receive some type of certification. So in addition to learning English skills, we're also helping people to fulfill career aspirations. Thank you for having me today.
Glad you're here. Caleb, you're our last finalist or panelist, final panelist.
Good afternoon. My name is Caleb Gates. I work also at the McAuley Center with Leya. And so she already mentioned a few things that we do. In terms of my background, I was born here in the States. My first real exposure to immigrants is really me going and studying in Peru, South America. So this is an interesting collection with Alejandro.
Nice work, Caleb.
Yeah. And so that kind of exposed me to, new language, new culture, and then eventually made my way back after spending a year there. Eventually, that started the path towards working with refugees and immigrants. So I've now been working with refugees and immigrants for the past 10 years in one capacity or another. For a lot of that time, I was doing case management, specifically with refugees that had just arrived here, so new arrivals to the US. So with the McAuley Center specifically, I've been with them for 2.5, it'll be 3 years come January. But we've done a variety of things. Another program that we have that I've been helping with recently, we have a child care training program helping individuals who have been here in the US get certified with DHS to provide in-home childcare, because that is a big need for these populations. So I was doing that. And then even more recently with the derecho, we opened up an emergency storm shelter for some of our refugee and immigrant families that were displaced due to the derecho. So I've been helping with that, and that will be finishing up here soon. But I'm also very happy to be participating in this.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys all for joining us. Once again, for the audience members, you can always send us a question, any questions you have for our panelists through the Whova chat, and we'll get to some of those questions as we go. First of all, I want to start off by asking, what are some challenges new immigrants face when they're arriving in a place like Cedar Rapids or Iowa more generally? And these questions can be answered by anyone who wants to jump in.
Just the culture shock, coming into a place. People who are coming in specifically as refugees, oftentimes, this was not their first choice. A lot of them just want to go back to their home countries, but that's not an option. And so just being in a new place with a different languages, new food, and culture can just be a really big shock. And so trying to navigate it, knowing where the kids should go to school, how to get them enrolled, and what's considered appropriate or not appropriate in a new culture can be difficult for families and individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I can add on to that. So there's a difference between families who have just arrived and they're very brand new to the United States, arriving here in Cedar Rapids. So we've helped a lot of those families, and there's all the challenges and barriers that Leya talked about. Language is a big one, but just navigating, just imagine you going to a new country and you don't speak the language, and you're told you have to become self-sufficient. You need to provide for your family within 90 days of arrival. So that's kind of what a lot of our families are kind of pushed into when they first arrive here. There are also a lot of families that are coming here as what we call secondary refugees. So they first were resettled somewhere in the US, and then they have a connection here. Maybe there's a community already established here, and they find out, or they're hearing that, hey, there's jobs here in Iowa, it's peaceful, the cost of living. The weather in the winter is not too good, but they can endure that because they find places, there's a place to stay for them and jobs.
And just a quick clarification. So there is a slight difference between a refugee and an immigrant. And so a lot of Caleb and I's our perspectives are going to be mostly on refugees, because that's what, that's our biggest program here. But just so people know that a refugee is someone, well, Caleb, I think you should.
Yeah, so basically a refugee is someone who had to flee. They're outside of their country of origin because of a well-founded fear of persecution because of who they are, what they believe. So it's not enough that you just had to flee your country because there was, because you're poor, because there's a natural disaster. You had to have a well-founded fear of persecution. In contrast, the term immigrant can mean a couple different things. We use that term more broadly to mean anyone who's moved to a new country, but there's a more technical definition for the purpose of the US government. Someone who enters the US with a status as an immigrant is someone who is coming here on a green card visa. Coming here as a legal permanent resident. That's primarily through family reunification, a family member asking them, applying for them to come and saying we will support them for them to be able to come here. There's some through employment that come on that visa, and then also what's called the diversity lottery visa program, which allows some people to come from some countries that have not historically had high levels of immigration to this country.
I'd like to add a challenge in the K-12 system for people coming to Iowa. It's with the language barrier, usually we have many languages covered for translators, but sometimes that can be difficult to attain. Another issue is if you have a student who comes here later in their K-12 years, for example, if they're coming into high school, they may have had no formal education in their country or very little formal education in their country. And then they are put into the United States in the Iowa K-12 public school system. And they are expected to take the classes that our children are taking. So if you're coming in your sophomore year into Cedar Rapids School District and you speak little to no English, you're still going to have to be put in biology class. And you're expected to pass that class. And the rules have changed and probably will continue to change on the type of grading and grading systems that are in place. But it's very difficult because within their school day, they may get 1, maybe 2 hours of specific and direct language instruction. However, the rest of their day, they're spent in PE, and in science and math and social studies, language arts. So that can be very difficult. In addition to that, many students are either expected and or just help assist their family by working. And so they possibly might have a full-time job and then come to high school and expect to perform as well as their peers in that setting. And so a lot of times what we see is students aging out of our system. At 21, you can no longer attend high school in the state of Iowa. And so we're working hard to bring those students over to Kirkwood to really just immerse them in language and then finish working on their high school diploma. So as far as the K-12 system, that's a pretty major barrier and a pretty huge challenge for people coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Alison, I would just add as well too, we talk so much about the importance of everything that we kind of just discussed, how interconnected it all is with regard to the success of, how well immigrant communities do and that sort of thing too. So in addition to language, there's also housing concerns as well, navigating the transportation would be a big one. We already kind of talked about the cultural differences, which is certainly a big. We'll talk, I'm sure, a little bit about employment, but finding employment opportunities is also sometimes very challenging. Even raising children in the United States, it's a big adjustment as well too. In many respects, you know, you want your kids to keep part of their culture and always be honored to be part of, you know, Burundi or Peru or different countries. But sometimes, you know, they lose a little bit of that too, just with being here in the United States too. I know the parents kind of struggle with that a little bit too. I think in many respects as well too, it can be very isolating as well. Isolation, I think, is sometimes a big issue as well too when you come to a new environment. So finding those ways to connect folks together is critical. And then unfortunately, I think there's sometimes, you know, discrimination that happens as well. You know, and I don't think Cedar Rapids is unique to that. By and large, I think Cedar Rapids is a fairly welcoming community. We really saw that with the response of the derecha, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, but there's always issues, you know, of people getting taken advantage of either within the housing community or getting their taxes done. And we could give you a whole bunch of examples, but that's why it's so important to have a community effort behind this, you know, behind helping the immigrant and refugee community really be part of the overall community as well.
And I think another challenge for these folks is just the perception that when you hear immigrant or refugee, it's a negative connotation in that, yes, we've talked about people who have limited or no formal schooling, but we're also talking about people who are doctors and lawyers, and they have PhDs, they have masters, they are professionals. We have had business owners coming into our program, and these folks are vital to our community, to our economic development, and they are such a resource. So that's one of the challenges that I would like to see, in that we start to change that perception to say, you know, these folks coming into Iowa are valuable, and through Gateways for Growth, we've shown that really the Iowa population was going down. However, with the immigrants and refugees coming into Iowa, it's sustaining our population. And so I think people need to realize how valuable they are to our, not only our state, but to our nation, in that they, you know, when they do work, they pay taxes and, you know, toward the school and that sort of thing. And so I would like for more people to understand that, you know, I have people in my program who, I had an attorney from Congo who spoke 7 languages, and that's valuable. And a lot of times we see that they're taking jobs that are very low in a wage. They're not working in something that they're certified to do or a professional in. And I would like to see that change as well, and working with community members to place folks where they can be a benefit, instead of, you know, I'm not saying working in a meat plant is not a benefit, but if you're a doctor or a lawyer, you'd much rather probably be helping folks. And I'd like to see that change start to happen.
Mm-hmm. What are some things that we can do as a community to be a more welcoming community for new arrivals to Iowa, for immigrants and refugees specifically?
I think by and large, it just comes down to individuals and also leaders of organizations across the community to really make it a commitment, to have the courage in many respects to really show that as something that you respect, and it's part of your, you know, your mission and vision as an organization. I think individually, it's okay to feel uncomfortable sometimes, you know, to have the courage to have just a conversation, even if you really have never had interactions with, you know, people of color or immigrants and refugees, just having a conversation, get to know people on a deep level. I guarantee that will change a lot of perceptions and a lot of minds. It's amazing just working, and I know all the panelists know this as well too, just how incredibly beautiful the immigrant and refugee community is inside and out. Just how grateful they are for, the opportunity that they have, how hardworking these folks are, is just something that really, truly is very heartfelt. And it's very difficult in many respects not to see yourself, in them, and not to see them in you, because they're part of the community. And that's the mentality I think that we have to really have, is not a them, it's an us. And the more we have that, I think, mentality, the more we will get to know each other on that deep level that I think we need to do a better job of sometimes.
Mhm.
I would like to say 2 points to that. One is just understanding cultural differences. And so, for example, in America, we're pretty punctual. And in other countries and other cultures, punctuality is not as important. And so, when class starts at 9 and my students show up at 20 after 9, that's a cultural difference. And just to understand that in a way, there are other differences as well, especially religious differences between males and females, and of course, with language. So just keeping that in mind, if somebody does something or doesn't do something that you question, could be a cultural difference, coming from where they're from. The other thing that I would like to say is that as far as welcoming immigrants to the community is, and I ask people this question a lot, is what would you do for your family in order to provide for your family, keep your family safe, and help your family succeed? And I think any human can relate to that. I mean, we are lucky, as Americans, that we were born in this country. But if you were born in a third world country, if you were born in a country where you had to hide from guerrillas in the bush, or you had to see your family be killed or sold into human trafficking, what would you do for your family to get out of that situation? And I think if people could just understand that they could be more welcoming, because it's just basic humanity and wanting what's best for you and your family. So.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that when someone is able to see themselves in a certain place, it makes you more comfortable to think like, oh, I can do that, or I feel welcomed here. So I think that as a community, as individuals in this community, we are very good about, welcoming people, and just are very kind people here in this community. But also, what about systematically, when you go to the different companies, are you seeing people who speak different languages, who are from different countries? If I walk, into, I don't know, like the city building, am I going to see someone who looks like me, or who's from a similar, background as me? And so my brother once was telling me when he was he was an AmeriCorps here at the Catherine McAuley Center. He said, Cedar Rapids is very welcoming, like on an individual level, but as a city, it's not very welcoming, because every officer that I see is like a white man or something, or, all the companies that I go into, I don't really see anyone who isn't, like an American. And so I feel like if access to employment was easier, or if companies were more welcoming, even if it is like government jobs are more welcoming, then I feel, this is him speaking, he felt that it would make the city more welcoming. People would know, like, if I go there, everywhere that I go, I'm going to see someone who is like or similar to me. And so I think that's something that we could do as a city, as a state, is to be able to not only have individuals who are, invested in being more welcoming and friendly, but also as a city, as a county, and even as a state, working with employers, working with agencies to be more welcoming in that sense, inviting people who don't look like them or who don't speak like them to be a part of the different programs and the companies, so that when people walk in through the doors, they're like, yep, this place feels like home, because I see someone that I'm familiar with, and now I know that even if I'm not familiar with that person, at least they're going to be accepting of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
If I can add to that, so there's both the systems aspect that Leya talked about and the individual aspect that Alejandro talked about. And I think both of those are important. It's not an either or, it's a both and. So on more like a systems perspective, there are rules and laws that need to be changed. And with that, it really makes a difference who's in office, both nationally at a state level and at a local level. So I would remind everyone, we have an election coming up in a couple of weeks, and you can vote early. So please vote if you're able to vote. There's just get involved with local government too. Sometimes it's discouraging because we can't maybe affect the change that we would like on a national level. But we have a lot more control over what happens locally. So please get involved. So that's more on the systems level. On the individual level, I would just say, look at people and love people, value people. I think about like all the signs that we've seen pop up around the city and around the country. It say Black Lives Matter, which is really important. But take that to an even more individual level. And I thought about, it'd be easy to just post a Black Lives Matter sign in my yard, but that Black family that lives down the street from me, that family from Kenya, that family from Burundi, do their lives matter to me? And I have to ask myself, do I really value them as individuals, and do I really show love for them? I think a key way of showing that value and love is through language. So I would encourage everyone, if you don't have any experience with refugees or immigrants, there are certain organizations here in town that are working with these populations. Offer to volunteer for them. If you see people around town that look different from you, that you maybe hear speaking a different language that's not English, stop and talk to them, say hi, smile. I would encourage you to, with some of the populations, think about learning at least a few words and phrases in that language, because there's nothing that speaks to a person directly to their heart than hearing something in their own language. And I know that's really true for me professionally and personally, and I think a lot of people here would be able to testify to that.
One thing that, I'm sure you guys have heard, I've heard, people who say, well, if they come here, they should speak English. And I just want to give the message that my students work a 12-hour shift, drive an hour each way, and get 4 hours of sleep and wake up with me every morning at 9 a.m. to learn English. And so they want to learn our language. They're working hard for themselves. They're working hard for their families. Many times when they come here, they don't have their families with them. And so they're sending money back to their countries or to their families, and working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and falling asleep in English class, but they show up and they want to learn English and they want to learn the culture here in America. Today we talked about Beyonce and Johnny Depp, but just that imagine if what would you be willing to do if you went to another country for a better life? And so they are working very, very hard. I had a student who had a stroke, and he was trying to learn how to walk, learn how to write with his other hand, and learn how to speak English after coming to this country. And he wanted a job. He wanted to work. And so that's the kind of resilience that these people have that come to America. They're not here to freeload. They're not here to take from us. they're here for a better life and that dream that everybody else would like as well.
I'm going to change topics a little bit. I'm wondering what challenges you guys have seen come up specifically related to the pandemic, and has that impacted how you guys and your organizations work?
Well, I'll just go ahead. We at Kirkwood had face-to-face classes, and in March, we were told we had to go all online in a week. And so with our students, our upper level students didn't have such a hard time going to fully online classes. Our lower level students have more of a difficult time. And so not only were we trying to provide instruction for our English language learners, we also had to still abide by state rules. So we had to test them. So we had to figure out, how do we test our students to meet our metrics and our goals and not have them in the building and not be close to them? And what do we do about technology? And so we tested students in the parking lot at Kirkwood using Wi-Fi in their cars and making sure we sanitized everything before and after, and did the best we could with that. And as we move forward with our new program year, we were able to work with some grateful donors, MSG, to provide a lending library. So we have computers that we've loaned out to our students, computers and hotspots. Of course, when derecho hit, it was a nightmare. It was a complete nightmare. We were just kind of getting up and going, and then that hit. And so, so we've encountered, we've lost a lot of students because we went all online. We lost a lot of students because of derecho. But then on the flip side, we've actually changed the structure of our program a little bit, and with our online classes, we're able to be more flexible and to have more offerings because it's online. But those would have been our major issues.
Yeah, for us, we've continued to, obviously, in many respects, you see, even though there's a lot of challenges, there's also a lot of opportunity with some of the change that's happened too. As Tara mentioned, we've continued doing all of our programming, but virtually by and large, which is very difficult to do because we thrive on face-to-face contact and that sort of thing too. I would say the unfortunate thing that I think COVID and even the derecho have highlighted is just the disparities that exist within communities of color, especially with health-related issues and COVID, affecting those communities at higher rates, very much so because of work environments that we've seen as well too, in manufacturing and that sort of thing as well, which I think some of those companies have addressed to an extent now, but it just highlights that disparity. The same thing with the derecho as well too, with the housing issue. And how that disproportionately impacted, again, communities of color. It's an opportunity for us to really do something about it, though. Instead of just talking about it, now is a prime time for us to continue to talk about those issues that always come up. Every time there's a disaster, every time there's a national emergency, who is disproportionately affected? It's the same folks. That's not okay. So what can we do as a society, as a community, to make sure that does not happen? So as an example, the thing that gives me hope is just the incredible outpouring of support that the community really showed to those communities right after the derecho hit. Is something that I don't think I've ever seen to that extent. So that care is there, but now we just have to put it into action, and more like, what's been referred to as the systemic action, systemic change, to help with that too. But I think there's certainly opportunity for us to really go in different directions that would benefit all people.
Oh. Hold on, Leya, you're muted. I'm trying to unmute you. There you go. Panelists, if you mute yourself, we have to physically unmute you because we got all these audience members. So that's fine.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Some of the things that I was going to say is, so our, I'm going to speak specifically about people who are from like Eastern Africa, which is a majority of the clients that we serve. They're very personable people who, you know, like to be close to others. And so when COVID started and we were only doing online or over the phone appointments, it was really difficult to communicate because a lot of our clients will call and say, hey, I have something that I need to tell you. Can I have an appointment? And they won't even give us a hint of like what it is that they want to talk about because they feel like, you know, important conversations should happen face to face. And so so that was a big problem, and that people weren't saying what, you know, what they needed help with or what they were going through because they felt like, okay, I'll just wait until I can see my case manager face to face. So we're a culture that likes to, like, you know, if I walk past you and I say hello, but I don't shake your hand, that's like a sign, you know, that's kind of disrespectful. Like so-and-so ignored me, even though I may have waved. That's not good enough. You have to, like, you know, shake hands or hug. And so, you know, telling people like, hey, I'm not being disrespectful, but I can't give you a hug right now because of, you know, the social distance and, you know, all of the things that we need to do so that we can stay safe. It has been difficult culturally for people to understand. And then also finding the right and appropriate resources to explain what the, you know, what the pandemic is and what, you know, what the illness is, what causes it, how it spreads. And then I think the biggest thing is trying to convince or relay the message that, you know, that social gatherings it should be limited or it just shouldn't happen at all, including family members. I know that was one of the things, even personally, that like, hey guys, I know we're family, but that there shouldn't be this many people in one house. So yeah, so that's been really difficult for people to just understanding, like, this is so people are new here, but this is new to all of us. And so we all have to follow and abide by these new rules. So.
Some more specific effects of COVID is, so we still had, so there was basically no arrivals coming in after COVID started. So that's affected a lot of people. But we had a few families that came in right before COVID really started up here. And because of that, there are a lot of agencies, including government agencies, that were shut down. We were having clients who could not apply for their Social Security cards because those offices were closed and they were only doing, you know, by appointment, et cetera, but not doing like for new Social Security applications. And so we have clients that are here, are ready to work, but not able to work because they can't get the documents that they need. So that's one specific instance that I thought of. Also, of course, during that time, there were a lot of elective surgeries and just medical appointments that could not happen because they were suspended. And so that, you know, leads, it's already difficult enough getting some of these populations to the doctor, and there's cultural things about, you know, why would you go to the doctor if you don't feel sick? But just the, you know, the lack of access to those appointments during those times, it can have a snowballing effect later down the road.
And a lot of our clients love using WhatsApp to communicate. And so when almost all of the appointments were over the phone, it was really difficult because most of the people don't pay for their phones. They just use, you know, the Wi-Fi to connect to WhatsApp. And so it's also stuff like that where people don't normally answer their regular phone calls, but only use WhatsApp. And then now most of your appointments are over the phone. And so I'm just getting people used to, okay, you're gonna have to pay for your phone and you're gonna have to answer when people call you so you can make sure you don't miss any appointments. That was also difficult.
You know, Alison, the other thing real quick that this has brought about to, and isn't just derecho related, but also with the pandemic, is just the need for more collaboration and coordination. So one thing that I'm, proud to be working with Catherine McAuley Center on is putting together the Immigrant and Refugee Coalition that will start up again, which it had in the past. But great places like Kirkwood will also be part of that, and really other organizations that also have a vested interest, which really should be almost everybody, but a vested interest in the success of the immigrant and refugee communities will be part of this group. Again, with any disaster, there's always learning, that happens, you hope, about how better to respond next time if, and hopefully never, anything were to happen, like this too. So again, silver linings are also important as well, but I think this would also strengthen our community as well.
I know after the derecho out reporting stories for the Gazette, I saw some of that collaboration happening. Was that something that was happening that sort of sprang up organically during that response out of necessity, or was that something where you guys already had those relationships in place?
I think in many respects, we had the relationships in place, but that it just kind of strengthened them during that time, because we knew we didn't also want to duplicate a lot of the, the services that we had already been doing and that sort of thing too. So we had began meeting as a group also during that recovery period too, which is still ongoing, but that was important. So I think we all know each other really well within the community. It's just now kind of connecting those, those dots as well too, to make it a little bit stronger moving forward.
Mm-hmm. The derecho obviously is, going to be the story in Cedar Rapids for a long time to come. What are some ongoing responses to the derecho that you think we still need to address as a community?
I have an idea. Go ahead, Leya. You were going to say something.
You go first.
I would say housing is still a big issue that needs to be addressed. Not only availability, but also just the condition that folks are living in. And I'm sure people try to do the best that they can, but I think we can still do better with regard to just the environment that we have families living in. That affects essentially everything that happens. And that's important for us to really realize. So if you're living in an environment where there's garbage spread all around and not being picked up outside, things aren't being trimmed, it doesn't make you as an individual, as a human being, feel good. It affects the human psyche very much. So we have to tackle, I think, that piece of it as well, more than anything. So that, to me, it kind of rises to the top, is really the housing component that we really need to tackle more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Affordable housing, good conditions, and then also employment. So there, with the shelter that we have, we're working one-on-one with the residents that are staying there right now. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing is, okay, where there's a place that we could help them move into, but employment is very difficult due to language barrier and the cultural barrier. It's hard to, to help people find employment, which is one of the services that we provide. But it's difficult when, someone comes and says, hey, I need a job that, pays me enough that, I can be self-sufficient, but I don't speak English. But I don't speak English makes everything like 10 times, if not 50 times more difficult to be able to find a job that meets those criteria. Oftentimes we find ourselves with three options: Whirlpool, Tyson's in Waterloo, or IVP in Tama, and that's not always a viable choice. And so I think that's something that that's something that has come up that we've noticed even more. Employment has always been something that's difficult for a refugee or immigrant, especially with lower English level, but especially right now with the pandemic and the derecho, you really see how much of a problem it is with there being with companies not hiring as much, and then adding on that barrier, people would just more rather hire someone who speaks the language, that they don't have to spend the extra time. So I think companies working with individuals from the different countries that are represented in the community, or the different agencies that work with refugees and immigrants to sort of talk about what the hiring process is and how to make it simpler, so that someone who English isn't their first language could be able to acquire that job, or even talking about, okay, let me hire someone who already speaks the language, and then let me move them up and train them to become trainers, so that if I'm hiring someone who doesn't speak English as a first language, we have someone that can be a trainer in the language, and not let that be a barrier. I think that would at least be a good start, but definitely employment is something that's very difficult, and that the light has shone on even brighter now with the pandemic and the derecho.
And those specific employers that Leya mentioned, so Tyson up in Waterloo, also down in Columbus Junction, Iowa Premium Beef in Tama, Whirlpool in Amana, JBS is another one in Marshalltown. All of those places have been COVID hotspots this past spring and summer. And we have had clients who contracted COVID from working at those places. And so, think about you're put in a situation where, especially during that time, it's like, okay, is it safe? I need to work. I need to provide for myself and for my family, but it may not be safe for me to go to work because I don't know if I might contract COVID. So that's a situation that a lot of our clients were in, and maybe even continue to be in.
And in addition to that, we're seeing, especially post-derecho, but with COVID, and many school districts are have their own way of doing school. Some are doing, a lot of them are doing that hybrid where the students are home at a couple days a week, and then they're at school a couple days a week. Cedar Rapids, as you know, got hit hard, and many students they're all online at the upper levels of the high school levels and stuff. And so a real challenge is for someone who has to work, but yet their children are at home because of school. So that's one challenge in and of itself. And the other challenge is how are they to help their kids, when they have low levels of English proficiency themselves, and now their children are at home and doing hybrid learning or all online learning, and expected to help their kids with school. And so that just compounds the issue with COVID and derecho and online learning and education, and that some people had to quit work. Some people had to quit our English classes. Many times we have, I deal with the kids in the background or other things, and sometimes I have to mute. Just I don't want to. I still want my students in class, but their children are also in class. And when it comes down to it, what's the priority? Priority is your kids, and you want to make sure your kids are getting the education they need. And so then English takes the back seat, and so it's a vicious cycle, if you will, and COVID and derecho just compounds the issues that much more.
Great, thank you guys. Well, we only have about 10 minutes left, so I do want to get to a couple of questions from the audience. One question we had come in was, have you encountered any climate refugees in your work who have had to flee their home countries due to the impacts of climate change?
So I'll just speak to that briefly. The challenge there is that under the current definition of a refugee, someone who flees their country because of natural disaster is by definition not a refugee. Now, I think they should be considered refugees because they had to flee, but because it's not because of fearing persecution, because of who they are, what they believe, they would not be considered by the official definition a refugee. And of course, there could be natural disasters and things that have been accentuated because of climate change. So there's some research that would seem to indicate that the crisis in Syria, possibly was, climate change causing famine might have been a factor in starting that or increasing unrest. We know as the climate warms that there will be a increase in conflict over scarcer resources. So this will be an ongoing problem, and the higher the climate, the higher the temperature goes, the more we will see that. But it's very difficult to tie any specific, natural disaster or any specific family fleeing directly because of climate change.
Now, we do have students in our program, and many students from Haiti, fleeing from that situation. We also have a student from the Marshall Islands. I don't know where the Marshall Islands are sinking because of climate change. And so, that was something that was brought to my attention just because of my student. I wasn't aware of it at the time. So we may see an influx of Marshallese coming, to the United States as well because of that situation.
Another question we have is, have federal policies in the last few years made it more difficult to replicate successes from things like the Balkans in the 90s when we had a lot of refugees coming from Bosnia, for example, or Southeast Asia in the 70s, which I know Iowa is well known for that program. Are things more difficult now?
So I will say when the Refugee Act of 1980 passed initially, and that was pushed in large part by Iowa Governor Robert Ray, did a lot, and he was the first governor in the country to welcome refugees to the U.S. And recognize the need to bring, really whole populations, have them resettled together. When that was initially passed, refugees were given 5 years of services, 5 years of support. Now we're down to 90 days, and that's, been over time. I would say certainly in the last couple of years, the numbers of refugees have been dramatically cut. So I think the historic average is something like 82 or 83,000 refugees coming in per year. This past year, we only had 11,000. And so certainly under the current administration, things have been more difficult for refugees coming in to get here to this country, and other policies put in place to make it practically impossible to actually obtain asylum in this country. So someone who is applying for asylum, they have to meet the same qualifications as a refugee. So they also had to prove that they had to flee their country because of a well-founded fear of persecution. But due to a lot of, especially the executive orders and administrative policies and changes put in place by the current administration, it has made it practically impossible for most people to be able to obtain asylum in this country.
I also think in many respects that the climate has also been unfortunate for immigrants and refugees as well. And as Tara mentioned earlier, more than anything right now, it seems like only the negative is really highlighted when there's so many more positives, within those communities as well too. So I think in many respects, it's gotten much more difficult in particular as well too. And we have an undocumented population here in Cedar Rapids as well too, who has struggled, especially recently as well too. But so I think the overall climate has also been affected in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, due to the current administration, we had to we lost an instructor based on her visa status.
We only have about 5 minutes left, so I want to thank everyone for joining us. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap this panel up?
Who wants to go first? I'm sure we all do.
What do you want people to take away when they go on to the next panel after this?
I think for me, more than anything, and the more and more I do this work, and it's just, like I said, I truly see it as an honor and a privilege to be able to work where I do and with the people that I do. I think more than anything, and I don't mean to sound like, Deepak Chopra here, but essentially everybody really just wants to be loved, listened to, and know that they really truly matter. And I think if we take that mentality, I think our world would be a much better place, a much open place as well too. And but I would just encourage folks to focus on all the beauty that the immigrant and refugee communities bring to our society. And remember, it's not a them, but it's an us mentality that we have to take forward as well too. There's just so much beauty in it.
Leya.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm just going around the Leya, do you want to?
Yeah.
Toss it to you.
I would just go back to sort of what Caleb said when we were talking about making people feel more welcome, and when he was talking about learning phrases and in different languages of people who you see around to make them feel more welcome. But also talking about, if you know that if you're a business owner or, a part of, I don't know, what are the government agencies here, just how can we make people feel welcomed? How can we have more of a representation in our agencies, in our company, and in our city just in general? I think if we, like we've said earlier, if we can do this on a personal level, but also systematically, it'll just make Cedar Rapids, Lake County, and Iowa in general a more welcoming place to be.
Definitely. Thank you. Got 2 minutes left. Go.
Okay. I would just like to say, educate yourself. Please don't take anything you see or hear, to heart. I would just say, if you hear something through the media, depending on what channel you watch or what you're looking at or listening to, educate yourself. Take the time to find out the facts as to what immigrants and refugees bring to our countries and bring to our communities, and the facts of who they are, why they're here, and what they do, and just the kind of people that they are, and also to educate yourself on other cultures. There's so much out there to learn, and every culture is unique and it's beautiful and it's different, and just learn and grow from that. It's just going to make all of us a better person. Get to know somebody who's not like you, and understand that yes, we have differences, but we also have similarities in that we love our families, we want what's best for each other, and we all want to live in a really great community.
I would just say lastly, if 2020 has taught us nothing else, it's that, there needs to be change in the world. Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you wish to see in the world. And I would ask everyone to consider that, they look around and see there needs to be change in any area, but especially when it comes to refugees and immigrants. And I ask you, what can you do to be that change that you wish to see in the world?
Well, I think that's a beautiful sentiment to wrap this up on. I want to thank all of you so much for joining us. I feel like we could talk about this topic all day long. I would encourage people, if they want to keep the conversations going, to go find our participants here our panelists here in the Whova app. You can send messages, and we want this to be a conference that, even though it's virtual, we can still keep sharing our ideas. Thank you also to all of the people who joined in and listened in the audience. We really appreciate it. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.